Beautiful. Well, we did say we'd hold off until 11:05, which we have done. So we'll just kick off with the information that Kirsty and I have. So just to let you know who we are, I guess. So my name is Corrine, and I'm one of the group fitness instructors and membership consultants here at Fernwood Campbelltown. And I have a certificate 3 in fitness, and obviously specialise specifically in group fitness. So Kirsty, I'll throw to you because your list is a little bit longer.
So I'm Kirsty. I work here obviously at Fernwood, Fit 30 coach and personal trainer. My list is a little bit longer, so I have the personal training certificate, so the Cert 3, Cert 4 and Diploma in Fitness. Finished, not last year, the year before, my Bachelor of Sport and Exercise Science, and am halfway through, but COVID interrupted, my Masters of Research. So that's kind of where I sit with my experiences. So I can definitely empathise with students, as I'm currently still one and have been a student for a long time. So yeah, this is a really good topic to touch base with.
Definitely, and I think what we want to sort of preface the discussion with is exactly that. So as you just heard, Kirsty is still a student, so still a university student. And has been for quite some time now. I've been studying really hard, and also has a family and a job to deal with. And in my history as well, I've been a university student and juggled study with work and family and all sorts of other competing things as well. So we've both got a pretty good grounding in terms of what life is really like for a student. So we'd like to think we know, what life is like for you guys, I guess, in terms of being a student and trying to fit healthy habits and wellness habits in around your lifestyle. So that's a little bit about us. So let's sort of start unpacking this topic a little bit. So, Kirsty, we wanted to sort of unpack the typical habits of university students in regards to exercise, rest, nutrition, and I know you've had a little bit of time to have a look at some research in regards to this area. So, what are the studies and the research currently showing in regards to the health habits of university students?
So I suppose, unfortunately, what I have found and what didn't really come as a surprise to me is that the health habits of students are pretty poor, actually. Physical activity is reduced, sleep quality is reduced, nutrition is poor. For a lot of the population, when they start university is typically the hardest time, because it's typically when they've left home, they're becoming independent. They're kind of just learning the ropes for most people. So the research that I have looked at, it was like one study had about 750 participants, and I recognise that across a university sample that might not be massive, but there's not actually that many other studies that are as big as that. And they did record that a whopping 78% of students, male and female, didn't do any physical activity. And then a little bit more than that didn't do vigorous activity. And the only thing that trumped that was vegetable intake. So about 86% of students in that sample of 750 did not eat the recommended amount of vegetables.
Wow.
So that's problematic. I suppose when we think of a student as a learning and producing individual, we've really got to look at the state of health that they're in overall. Obviously today we will touch on a few things, but other activities, fruit intake, that was quite low. So it's really important to think of the student, I suppose, as a whole. And if you're not treating your body very well, chances are what you produce won't be to the best of your ability. So that's kind of where we want to help out there and provide some advice, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the nutrition side of things really rings true with me, because I can remember being at university and we had the university cafeteria back in the day that was very well priced, I must admit. It was university pricing. But the number one thing that we used to go and get for lunch was a takeaway container of white boiled rice with sweet and sour sauce. So they would skim the sauce off the sweet and sour pork and put it on the rice for you, and it was 80 cents. So that was lunch. And when you look at that,
that's very cost effective, isn't it? And that's another thing that weighs in food choices is cost, money, budget.
yeah.
80 cents is ridiculous.
Now, granted, it was a few years ago that I was at university. But when you look at that, like I'm fueling myself for study and work and other activities on a container of white boiled rice.
Yeah, you do have to work actually pretty hard when you're on campus to try and make some good choices. Although nutrition is fast becoming something of interest in terms of your cognitive ability and your general health and well-being, it's certainly not something that is the norm. You actually still have to go and search for those healthy options. The white rice still exists. The hot chips still exist. They're all still available and they're all still cheap. So it does take a lot of effort to not have the cheap carbohydrate-rich foods and to try and pick something that's more in tune with what your body needs at the time. So yeah, I guess in terms of nutrition, there's a lot we can talk about, but it's all part of that productive student, what they eat and what they do.
Yeah, and I guess a good place to start in terms of nutrition is the food guidelines, the Australian food guidelines.
Yep, yeah, and the information is there. So the sample that they looked at, they were looking at the guidelines and just if the students were able to adhere to those guidelines. And unfortunately, majority of the case, it wasn't so, unfortunately.
So let's look at sort of exercise and start unpacking how exercise can help. So what are the studies sort of showing as to how exercise can help a student?
Okay, so there's actually quite a few things. So I don't miss anything. I'll just refer to a list. So I suppose, first of all, let's kind of start from top down. So exercise in itself is very beneficial for the brain, for the grey matter, for your neural plasticity. Those sorts of things come into something where we're still really investigating how this happens. There's a couple of different reasons why this might happen: increased cerebral blood flow, greater availability of nutrients, mainly glucose, but then also lipids as well. Both of those are really important for your brain function. And then we're also looking at something called a brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which I won't get into now, but it is something that has been shown to help with your neural regeneration in your brain. So when we're looking at the brain, obviously this is where we're taking information in, we're learning, we're integrating, and we're starting to kind of knit some pieces together to produce pieces of work like assessments, assignments, all those sorts of things. So if your brain health or cognitive function is not working optimally, then you're kind of on the back foot. So it is really important to, I suppose, recognize that academic performance really does come back to how are you in terms of your cognitive performance, and that's something to definitely pay attention to. And a lot of research has actually looked at this this idea of like a working memory, cognitive function, your executive function, and it does show that with certain levels of exercise, that your working memory will actually increase. And your reaction time to things will reduce. So you'll be quicker to be able to identify if something, say you've got a series of 7 numbers and randomly the assessor throws a separate number in there that wasn't there before, you'll be able to quickly identify, no, that wasn't there before. So that's your working memory. It's really quick. And that's something that's really important when you're a student and you're deciding what information you need at the time, and what's kind of come in that might not be right. I suppose the next thing that we need to look at, aside from the brain and how that works, is looking into the prevention of cognitive decline. So as students, we do work really, really hard, and it might sound like, oh, we're talking years in advance where this might happen, but actually reducing cognitive decline should start as soon as possible because it can happen very early in life. So you do want to offset that. Admittedly, with reducing the cognitive decline, the research looks more in the older population, but there is that general thought as the sooner the better, the use it or lose it type approach.
Funny, I was going to say that, yeah, use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. It is quite important. It does rely on on making sure that you're fueling it well to be able to use it well and keep it strong. Much like a muscle, if the muscle's not getting the nutrients it needs, it just simply won't build for you, no matter how much you try. So a couple of other things that obviously mood is a really big thing. Physical exercise seems to have a lot of impact in terms of, I suppose, improving a person's perception of how they feel, giving them a sense of empowerment. One study did look at running a small sample, albeit very small, but they did look at several different domains that students reported that they felt after exercise. So if you don't mind, I can take you through each one of those just quickly.
Would love it. Love it.
Okay. All right. So let's have a look here. So the first one was positive emotion. So this was more about how they felt about engaging in the exercise. Were they proud that they engaged in the exercise? Generally, the answer is yes. Do they feel empowered and strong after doing the exercise? Then yes, the answer is yes. So that's one side of things that exercise does provide the person that is working out, is just that general positive emotion. And being a student, sometimes it's really hard to stay positive. Sometimes, there's deadlines and there's lots of deliverables that you need to get on top of. And if you're not feeling positive, you can get writer's block, and sometimes you just can't read anymore. You can't do anymore. So it's really important to get you back into that positive, empowered frame of mind. So for me, especially, that is especially true for me. When I'm having a bad time and I can't seem to get stuff onto paper, I have to move. I have to start to feel positive, and that's the best way for me to do it. The next one was unity of body and mind. So as kind of mentioned before, and it does kind of come to that positive emotion, but it was more about taking that time, like when we go for a walk, we can think about things. So we're using our body to unwrap what's going on in our mind. It helps us develop a sense of what's really happening. It takes us out of the situation where we become a bit stuck and gives us the freedom to move and really think it through. So that's really important for a student as well, especially when you hit writer's block, or you've just read so much and you can't read no more and you just need to integrate it. Sometimes going for a walk, clearing your head, is the best way to approach it. So that's one thing that they reported. Another one was heightened level of self-esteem. Again, that comes back to just feeling proud that you've done it. I've done this, I said I would do this, this felt good, I feel good about me. That kind of envelope of emotion is really important for a student, because we know that handing in assignments, there's almost a 99% chance we're not going to get 100% on that assignment.
Yeah, there's going to be something in there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always going to be some feedback that you could have improved this, you could have improved that. And as a student, you do have to deal with that. You do have to say, okay, yes, I could have done better. But repeatedly, time after time after time, it does start to have an effect on your self-esteem. So it's really important to do activities that build up your self-esteem rather than make you critical of yourself. Simple things like going for a walk can actually do amazing things in terms of your self-esteem. So that's one thing. Another thing was it kind of comes back to the mind-body unity, but it was problem-focused concentration or coping. So being able to have that time away, being able to cope with the problem at hand, and being able to come back to it with fresh eyes and say, I've had a thought, I've had to think about it, I'm going to do this instead, I'm going to do that. Even if it is just dealing with feedback from an assessment, taking that feedback, going for a walk with it, understanding it's not personal, working out ways that you can integrate that feedback in to make yourself better at whatever it was that you've been picked up on is really important, because getting feedback and ignoring feedback is not going to help you improve. So you've got to take those things on board. So that's
a lot of it's sort of about finding perspective and finding, developing perspective and self-esteem.
So easy to lose perspective when you've got your head buried in books and you're concentrating on one unit, one subject, one theme over and over and over again for hours on end. It is really easy to lose focus on anything else that's going on around you. And I guess the last one was enhanced health behavior. So just in general, a general health behavior that's healthy is good to take on board. Typically what you find is that individuals that will put effort into their health don't necessarily do sabotaging health behaviors, or they try their best to offset them. So if you find yourself constantly sedentary, constantly stressed, eating, drinking all the wrong things and not sleeping, it's a really bad mix. Typically when you start to put a little bit of effort into your health, going for a walk, getting more sleep, drinking more water, those sorts of things like eating chocolate and really kind of sabotaging yourself are less, you don't want them anymore. So you're quite happy to go, oh no, I've put effort in building healthy habits. I might ignore that unhealthy habit for the moment. So I suppose those were some of the 6 things that this study found when it spoke to students and asked them, how did you feel after exercise?
Yeah. And I think the other thing to note on that last point, and we frequently see it with our clients in the club, is often if you start to move your body, you then do get those positive mood benefits. So where, you get the endorphins, you get the positive mood benefits, and some of the other unhealthy habits that we may have been using to get the same endorphin rush. So, the chocolate, the bad eating habits, the other habits that we were using to get that endorphin rush, we're now getting from exercise. So we don't leach back to those bad habits that we were reaching for before to get that same sort of feeling.
And I suppose that's the whole idea, isn't it? Start off small, one little thing at a time, one little healthy habit at a time, builds and builds and builds until you find yourself in a very different place. So don't think that you need to change everything all at once, but start off small and then build on those healthy habits, and they'll just eventually fall by the wayside, and it won't be such a travesty.
Yes.
You won't have to turn around, get bad news from maybe your doctor, and then you've got to dump everything. Because even then the advice will be to start out small to help your adherence and obviously to help the long-term goal overall. So yeah, those were the 6 things in terms of the emotion. But another study did look at things related to study fatigue. So they used these words to describe specifically what students would feel. Those things were emotional exhaustion, overall fatigue, need for recovery, and then the secondary effects for those were sleep quality, self-efficacy, physical fitness, and cognitive function. So they did this study with 97 people, and in the end, after a small intervention, the intervention was 6 weeks, they found that the ratings of overall fatigue and need for recovery reduced because they had built up a certain level of stamina by having this 6-week intervention. And then that led to the secondary improvement of their sleep quality. And we know how important sleep is for information processing and just kind of working your way through what's happened throughout the day and integrating that and learning. Most important for learning. If you're sleep deprived, you're going to find it very difficult to take on new information and retain it.
Yes.
So being able to improve sleep quality is going to help a student be able to retain more information and unpack that in the sleep. What they did find, though, which was quite interesting, when the study finished, at the 12-week mark, actually 80% of the participants that did exercise continued to exercise on their own because they felt the benefits of exercise outweighed the time it took to exercise or whatever other negative connotation they had towards exercise, which stopped them in the beginning. So that's really quite important. Once you kind of get going, chances are, if you're moving in the right direction and under the right guidance, you will maintain it, and it will show its benefits for you. So.
And I think if we look at the benefits that you discussed earlier on in regards to productivity, then the time taken out to exercise and look after your health and wellness is often, a balancing act between productivity. So there's no point sitting there for hours and hours and hours and hours on end if you're not being productive. You may be better off spending 45 minutes going out for a long walk or a yoga class or whatever it is and coming back and actually being more productive. So you may actually find that you gain time by exercising.
Absolutely. And that is completely the case. That definitely happened for me. But then there are some days where you go for a walk, you come back and you're still flat. And maybe on those days, if you don't have a really tight deadline, maybe it's time to maybe have a day of self-care. Maybe it's time to rest, especially when we get towards the end of semesters. Things can get very hairy, but it is still important to remember that if you put your worst foot forward, that's what you're going to submit, and you don't want to submit your worst foot. So you want to put your best foot forward, put your best work forward, and by doing so and taking some time out for self-care, you're more equipped to be able to do that. So that would be my advice for anyone that's studying, is make sure that you check in with yourself quite frequently, take breaks, and definitely do something for your own self-care to build up those 6 domains that we spoke about, but also to reduce the study-related fatigue. It's really important that you do that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Types of exercise. Let's talk types of exercise that might be of most benefit to students. Obviously, here at the club, we run a massive number of different health and wellness classes, things like yoga, Pilates. There's other sort of high intensity training classes. But what is of most benefit to students?
Okay, so a lot of the research at the moment, from what I've looked at, really does look at moderate aerobic. And it does appear that moderate aerobic seems to have the best acute effects, so straight thereafter and of a single bout, and then long term as well. So they're not dismissing high intensity or resistance training, but for the acute effects, generally moderate aerobic is where you want to be at. So around that 60% mark seems to be a good place, and that's something that you can easily do by going for a brisk walk, maybe even a jog, depending on your fitness level. So coming in and doing a resistance training session is by all means good for your body, mind, body, soul, and obviously building your muscle mass as well, keeping you injury free. But with respect to, I suppose, the cognitive, because the resistance training doesn't bring about as much blood flow to the brain, it doesn't have those quicker type effects, but it does still release the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So over time, it does have an effect. When they've looked at high intensity, admittedly, what they've found is sometimes that doesn't necessarily help as much as moderate, but it can have an effect long-term if you maintain it long-term. So if you do one really high intensity session, you might not notice a difference. But if you do it over the course of months, you will notice a difference. They find this specifically quite high in the older population. They really, really benefit from the high intensity workout. So really, I suppose it is a process of working out what intensity works for you, what frequency works for you. But if you're starting out, I would definitely say aerobic, moderate, and try to get the duration above 10 to 15 minutes so that you can really get all the benefits. But definitely don't discredit strength and then the HIIT training. But think of those as more long-term, not acute type things. So if you're struggling at your desk and you don't have access to a gym, or you do have access to a gym, take some time out. If you really need to get back to work, take some time out, do a quick 30, 40, maybe even 60-minute session of a moderate intensity aerobic workout, and then get back to what you were doing, and you should notice a difference there.
And I think I can sort of vouch for that in terms of, although I'm not studying now, so I'm here in the club 5 days a week, and my own sort of, while I'm instructing classes throughout the week, I really don't get a good quality workout for myself in until Thursday mornings. And I often find that although Thursday is a short work day for me, it often becomes my most productive day. And it's probably a reflection of the fact that I do my first workout of the week for myself on a Thursday morning, 6 a.m.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's, it really sets me up to be in a great place for the day. And I think, that's probably a great example of me being able to benefit from getting in there, getting a session done, and being ready for the day and being more productive. It's definitely my most productive day in the club.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it kind of comes back to making sure that it's your workout and it's individualized for you. It's important to make sure that you keep yourself accountable for what you're doing. And if you need some help, then to reach out and ask someone that's experienced and trained in providing exercise prescription. So that way you can get the benefits of it and you're not kind of losing time by not quite hitting the mark. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and definitely just not overcomplicating it. So when you mentioned before, 10 or 15 minutes, perfect. If you've got that brain fog, you've got the mind block, jump up, 10 or 15 minutes, brisk walk, come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, aside from that, you've also got, I suppose, the theory of the getting out into nature and the greening and the calming effect of the greens and blues that exist in nature, and obviously fresh air and the change in perspective, like you mentioned before. All these sorts of things can really just recenter you. So yeah, definitely going out into nature, going for a walk, do what you need to do, but the actual exercise itself is going to benefit you.
Absolutely. Did you have any final words of wisdom as a student yourself?
As a student myself, I reach out to students. I know being a student is really hard. I know it can be a little soul crushing at times, but I'm really proud of the things that I've accomplished being a student. Was I a perfect student to start with in terms of my exercise? No. And I've got a background in sport, health, and exercise. And did I still sit at my computer for hours on end, stressing and stressing? Yes, I did. So don't be too hard on yourself. You can always get up out of that chair and go for a walk. If you don't, again, don't be too hard on yourself. All the best of us, we fall down, even with all the information that we've got and all the education that we're given, but we've still got to know that deep down inside of us, it's the best thing to do. So we just get up and we go. And then eventually, bit, by gradual bit, you get better and better and better. When I started uni, I was incredibly overwhelmed. It was a massive learning process. I had to get to know the community. It was very difficult. But as I got closer towards the end of my degree, I started to notice that I had a little bit more focus in self-care. And that really did help me remain calm as I approached the end of my degree. Though not without little burnouts in the way. And I could have done things better, I'm sure. But I did survive. And I think between my Cert 3, 4, diploma, bachelor, and where I am now, that equates to, oh my goodness, maybe 7 years worth of study.
Yeah.
Back. So, and I'm still standing.
Definitely still standing, still going strong.
Hang in there.